All right, I'm sure everybody could lip read that introduction. Vicky, do we have any late items?
There are no late items, Mr. Mayor.
All right, hearing none, could I have a mover to adopt the agenda? Councillor Cairns moves and Councillor McBain seconds. All those in favor? Thank you, Councillor McGuire. That motion is carried. Because it is a special meeting, we have no minutes from previous meetings to deal with this evening. So we'll move right into the reports. And the first one is the 2024 Union of British Columbia Municipalities, or UBCM, Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. And the motion on the floor is the council direct staff to apply to the UBCM, Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, or 100% of the required funds for the Composite Fire Department's Equipment and Training Grant Program. Councillor McBain moves and Councillor Roberts seconds. Discussion. Any comments or discussion on this one? Go ahead, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. Recent readings have put us pretty much at the top of the class in how we're dealing with our forest industry as it surrounds our community and how we're mitigating things so well. I think this is just another step in the right direction, and I know the chief would be eager to do this, so I'm really in favor of this.
To be clear, I should have finished off the sentence there. This is to purchase structural fire protection equipment for to support prescribed burns.
Yeah.
And certainly we in this area are leading the country when it comes to prescribed burning. This is one more step in the process for us. Okay, there's no further comments. We'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Second part of this is that if the application is approved, council directs staff to include an expenditure of $38,295 in year one of the 2025 to 2029 5-year financial plan bylaw, with the identified funding source being the grant revenue anticipated through this particular fund. Councillor McBain moves and Councillor McGuire seconds. All those in favor? Motion is carried. All right, second up this evening, and really the last item, since we only have the two as part of this special meeting, is the community grants policy for consideration and approval. There are two motions on the floor. The first is that council repeal community grants policy number FIN 002 dated May 17th and amended August 17th and November 9th, 2020, and further, and October the 10th, 2023, and further the council approve new community grants policy number FIN 004 substantially in the form attached to the report from the manager of community development and the chief admin officer dated October the 7th. Mover, please. Councillor McBain moves and Councillor Cairns seconds. All right, discussion. Pam, did you want to lead us off?
Sure, just very high level. Back in January of this year, council did request that we have a look at the policy. And we've spent many months doing that and been back and forth, Jim and I and Krista, our CFO, and looking at how we can make that policy more clear for applicants, how we can be certainly more accountable to taxpayers, and just be more efficient with the grants that we're giving out to the community. So we did come back a couple of weeks ago with some proposed changes. Council did request that we go back and have a look at that again. So we've done that, and we've come up with essentially this layout. So the main proposed changes is to identify various pots for community grants. So the existing long-term or standing grants would essentially stay the same for the next 3 years, at which point those grant recipients would be asked to reapply. And then we would look at a phased reduction in the program and event grant pots. to $80,000 in 2025 and then $30,000 in 2026 and every year subsequent to that, with a 1.5% inflationary increase each year. Grant applications will be now vetted by a committee. And every organization would be limited to 1 grant per year, and the max amounts each applicant is eligible to apply for will be $8,000. And that's essentially the main changes. The policies also become a lot clearer. It answers questions that many applicants have been asking for years. And just makes the whole process just a lot more clear for applicants.
All right, so thank you, Pam. Did you wish to add anything? Just for the question.
Yeah, I think Pam gave a pretty good overview there. The important pieces are that the standing grants, which have been renamed long-term grants in the new policy, do remain. They'll continue to get a 1.5% escalator every year as per the current policy. Council will still accept applications for new long-term grants, but the way the policy is being proposed now, the application-based grants are their own pot of money. So under the current policy, every time a standing grant or new standing grant is issued, it would reduce the pot of money for the application-based grants. So with this one, if a new long-term grant is approved by council, that would need to be funded to increase the property tax because it no longer pulls from that other pot. So that'll remain the proposed amounts that went over for the application-based grants. And the other forms of support that the community groups receive that total $834,000 in the report here. So those being permissive property tax exemptions for the groups that use city facilities. So $180,000, the support of Pam in whichever way she can provide it to the community groups, free use of city facilities and fee-for-service agreements. So those all still remain in addition to the grant that'll be provided under the grant or the community grants policy. So yeah, I think that pretty covers it.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Jim. Go ahead, Councilor McBain.
Yeah, really well written report. Couple of things I really like about it. One, I like having the comparisons, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to conform to what others are doing. It's just nice to have the comparables in there. I really like the fact that, I mean, this is, what we talked about at the last meeting was if we would have went kind of the direction I think that was recommended at the last meeting, would have been a pretty dramatic change to a community that has a lot of groups that do look for grants and one of the things that I at least brought up last time was just the notion of incremental change, which I'm a huge believer in, whether it's some policy like this or something else. And staff listened and came back, and I think this is a really good compromise into what was initially proposed, and I really do like the fact that there's an opportunity to review this every couple of years because, like I said, it's a pretty significant change. We're in the middle of council right now, and we'll be able to get feedback at the next election whether the needle's going to go one way or the other. So really well done, and I really like the way that this was laid out, so appreciate that.
Councilor McBain. Go ahead, Councilor McGuire.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate the changes that have been made here and that you are, that some of the concerns have been addressed. I still have a bit of an issue with the $100,000 reduction, though. I find that's pretty significant for the community events. We're going from around $130,000 to $30,000. I would support a moderate reduction in the first year, and then we'll have a committee at that point that can provide feedback for future reductions in a later fiscal year. Even, that's even next year, we would already be seeing the impacts of this and hearing feedback. And we could look at a further reduction then. So yeah, I would support this policy if we only had the single reduction. And my preference would be it would be more moderate. So maybe in the $30,000 or $40,000 range. And then I also had another thought, and this is just maybe a question for Pam, whether this was considered. I was curious, and maybe this will come up at the committee level later on anyways, but whether we'd consider doing a simple approval or denial for the community, the events grants, just to simplify the process for the committee and not have all these fractional approvals that we've been having in the past. This would it'd encourage nonprofits to be submitting more realistic budgets. It would probably simplify the process, and it also could increase the merit of the grant program, because you'd have to meet a higher standard to be able to actually get an approval. And then, yeah, I think those are my only questions at this point. I support the long-term changes. Those grants have needed a little bit of a tweak, and I'm curious to see how these new changes happen in the next few years.
Thanks, Councilor McGuire. Further? Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Cairns.
Thank you. And thanks to Pam and others who did great work on updating this policy. And it's really great to see. And I'm also a strong supporter of incremental change. And I want to highlight, we talked about having a full discussion to explore this topic because it's a lot of change all at once. So I had thought at September 9th meeting, we had agreed to a community of the whole meeting so we could really open this up. But so in lieu of that, I have a few questions.
We're not in a hurry to see.
Okay, alrighty. So, I look to this and I see some of the comparisons that are being made. But when I look back at the earlier report that was provided, we're making those comparisons of our application-driven grants to other cities that don't use application-driven grants. So, if we actually compare, then we should be looking at their community grants as a whole. And pulling from that, again, Kimberley tax revenue, 13,110,000 and change, and community grants in 2024 of 245,000, and Nelson, slightly lower tax revenue, allocates 354, but that goes to their Arts Council, their economic development, Nelson Area Economic Development, their youth center. Similarly with Fernie, they're doing larger grant of 500,000 under a similar tax base to their Chamber of Commerce, Fernie Heritage Library, the Fernie Arts Council, Educational Scholarships, and Historical Society, plus a couple of other organizations. And then we look at a larger center like Cranbrook, which is quite different because they're providing a broader range of services in-house, including economic development and more in their parks and recreation, and has a much broader range of services that are available within their community that that we don't have in Kimberley. So that one is not really comparable. So I think in terms of that bigger amount, what's really different between our communities is that we've got this application-driven grant process where they have larger grants that they're giving to fewer organizations. And so I'd be looking at kind of what's our longer term vision rather than just the absolute amounts that are going to the application-driven process. Are we more open to taking a slightly more strategic approach and having more long-term grants? But when I look at this and I look at number 4, it states, as Jim pointed out, that any new applications for standing grants would result in a property tax increase. So that's landing on the back of organizations who didn't get in the door just before, you know, an update to the policy, which seems unfair. And it does seem to me that there should be a transition period to actually sort some of this out so that it's not just, oh, well, you happened to get in the door and you didn't. And now it's on you that you're going to be causing an increase to property taxes. So an organization, you know, that I'm the liaison for is the Kimberley Nature Park Society, which has been delivering services on behalf of the city under the MOU for decades and all by volunteers. And they're in the process of hiring an operations manager, and they do require a standing grant. And and I'm sure there's, you know, there are a number of other organizations that are really core to the community. So I think it's really important to look at what we're doing by kind of creating you know, effective immediately. You will be incurring a tax increase if you come in for a standing grant and it's approved by council. It's not something that I really wanted to bring up in the context of community grants, but, you know, in orders of magnitude, we've been giving developers a break by not charging development cost charges. And it's a pretty easy calculation that would see that, you know, we've foregone really millions over the last 5 years by not charging developers for the infrastructure they're profiting from. And so, and residents and business owners have had to make up for that in their property taxes. And to look at, you know, a couple $100,000 for community organizations that are run by volunteers that are running key assets and services. They shouldn't be on the hook for triggering those tax increases while developers are basically, you know, being held up in terms of the infrastructure costs by residents. Okay, and then I think that's, you know, that's pretty much my piece. So at this point, you know, I don't support the number I'm seeing in terms of overall savings are this would allow council to either reallocate the resulting savings of approximately 60,000 in 2025 and 110K in 2026 to city projects such as infrastructure repairs. That's, you know, 170,000, and it's in my view too much all at once. I would like to see what the impacts are of the policy changes and how we're looking longer term and through a community or a community committee lens at these before proceeding. I'm not in support of that level of funding cut.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Cairns. Go ahead, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While I appreciate taking a few of these examples as comparables, I don't really care. As far as I'm concerned, we have to create an environment that we can live in. The 2%, we keep saying we have a whole bunch of new building, we're incurring new tax return. We need these taxes to deal with our infrastructure. And so we're automatically saying with the way we've been that, well, let's just keep adding that extra bit onto the event taxes because we're earning more taxes, so we should have more of the event taxing. And I'm not sure that that's generally the way to go. I think the thing that I feel it's been missing in this whole picture has been the idea that the city has now become somehow responsible for other organizations. It's not part of our general core structure, and it's getting bigger and bigger, and it moves us farther away from the core services that we're supposed to be providing. We struggle to do things like keeping our parks going, and we struggle to do so many things, but somehow or other, this big lump of money given out in little pieces is supposed to fix the world. And in a lot of cases, it doesn't. And so I feel like this is a really good kick at the can as to how this could work. I don't think I would be opposed to the fact of maybe making a slightly less of a drop in the first year. and then have the committee kind of make some kind of committee down the road, because you'll have a little bit of experience on that. But I also feel very strongly about the fact that we should be supporting a lot of these things, like the Arts Council and the Heritage Society and the Food Recovery people. I really like the concept that those people that make that long-term commitment thing does actually show up as a tax increase. Because the other one kind of is like stealing from the tax increase, right? It's like hidden, the fact that it's growing all the time. And I like it to be visible. If we're gonna say that we're going to do long-term grants for whomever it may be, then we know that we make that decision, it's going to result in a tax increase. And so we can be very thoughtful about the choices that we make in that case. The other piece of it is if we're not going to give them that money, then how are they going to succeed? Are we going to be dealing with them through the shorter term event period? Are they going to be like an organization that has 5 different events and they want money for each of those 5 events? You know, that's sort of what's been happening. And I think the pulling it back together and making it kind of a little bit more transparent, really, so that people really know this is the rules, this is how it works. And just as a matter of interest, when we were doing the water park through Rotary, I ended up doing 42 different written grants to get money to be able to afford that $325,000 water park. And the rules inside of those grants are stringent and strict and require reporting back and have timelines in them. And ours haven't been that way. We're just saying, here you go, have fun. And I don't think we're quite as, I think we need more accountability than that. And I think that I like that idea of pulling back on that kind of stuff that just kind of gets handed out without any kind of rules or accountability, or just because you ask. That's my point of view.
Thanks for those comments, Councilor Roberts. I've got a couple as well. I think, first of all, I think we need to be very clear that every single dollar comes from tax money. That all the money we get at the city, notwithstanding the grants for specific things that come in, it all comes from tax dollars. What we have, as Jim had indicated earlier, is we have a finite pot. And if we're going to expand that by including others, the only way we can expand that is by a tax increase. And it's just simple math. The comparables, it's interesting. I didn't, kind of my perception of the comparables wasn't on the amount of money that they were putting into their grants specifically. It was money going in versus the amount of tax dollars that are available to make that happen. I kind of agree with Sandra to an extent. You mentioned this as well, Sue. And I don't think it really matters what other communities are doing. It's what can we afford to do? And what we're trying to do here now is provide some incremental change over a policy that was first put in place almost 10 years ago. It was like 8 years ago now. It's long overdue for an update. And that's really all we're doing here now, is doing an update with some really good incremental change. I think it's also important to note that looking at this, what ends up being really a very minor reduction. I mean, simply the other rules, by taking out the double dipping and by limiting the grants to $8,000, a maximum of $8,000, it chews up a large portion of the reduction that has, pardon me, that has been put forward. Hang on a second, I lost the point I was going to make on that. I did a little bit of a segue. Oh, I know. I think it's important to note that reviewing this particular program is participatory. In other words, every single department, as we move into the budgeting period right now, is doing exactly the same thing. The difference is we as councillors don't see what they're doing. There are a lot of meaningful programs and services and things that are not going to make the cut simply because we can't afford 15% tax increases, which is about where we'd be if in fact everything that needed to be done were put on the table. So this is simply participatory. It's participating in what, as we move into the budget period, what is the overall discretion that we have to give to all of the programs and services that we have. And at the end of the day, when we take a look at it in totality, it is a pretty minor, a minor change at the end of the day. I'd also like to point out that we have a total of 62 not-for-profit organizations in Kimberley. 62. 7 of those are churches. We have actually had some grant applications from a couple of churches that have come in, but typically not all that many. So even if you remove churches, from the equation, we're in the 55 not-for-profits. Each year, we get applications for the neighborhood of around 35 to 40 that come in on any given year. So we have an awful lot of not-for-profits that are sitting on the sidelines, despite the amount of money that we're giving out today. So I think all of that helps create the picture, of what we're dealing with. I think it's important to note that regardless of what we do with the updated policy, the city of Kimberley is committed to strong support for the not-for-profits that we have in the community. We're still going to be spending in the neighborhood of $8,000 a year across the various programs that we're doing for the not-for-profits. That, I think, as it pointed out in the report here, it's 6.4% of our variable tax rate is given out to not-for-profits. That is substantial. So we provide a lot of support. We want to continue to provide that support. We're just modifying it in a way that is going to fit with, with what we can afford to do at this point in time. As Councillor McBain has suggested, this program, once it's in here, I think it behooves us and future councils to review this on a regular basis, whether that's every couple of years or every 4-year term, which is probably more appropriate to determine where we sit at that point in time, because things change fairly radically in 4 years, both in terms of the economics that we're dealing with and all of the other variables. So I think that our communications manager has or community development manager, many hats you wear, Pam, has done an awesome job at coming up with a with a compromise here that makes sense for the times. Anyway, sorry to be a little long-winded. Further. Go ahead, Sue.
I'd just like to clarify that I really appreciate the policy work that's been done here, and I'm in support of all of it. It's the depth of the cut that I'm concerned about, and I would support something that was smaller.
Anything further? Councilor McGuire, good. Yep. Okay, so the motion on the floor is twofold. One is to repeal the current policy, and the second is to move forward with the recommendations as put forward in the staff report. So I will call the question then. All those in favor? Those opposed? Councilor McGuire and Councilor Aarons are opposed. Motion is carried. Nice work on that now. And best of luck with the implementation. It's probably going to be hard to put policy together. Okay, believe it or not, that's a wrap on the regular agenda for the special meeting. We do have a significant item in camera this evening. Pardon me, and I would just like to, for the edification of our public, in camera doesn't mean we're doing things behind closed doors. I've heard this comment as we were going through the by-election cycle that we have too many meetings that are behind closed doors. These in-camera sessions are legislated. Anything to do with land, labor, or legal proceedings, we need to do in camera because they could have a material impact on the projects themselves and the cost of the projects and or the liability to the city of Kimberley. So we are legislated by law when any of those topics come up to do, to conduct those in camera. Just so everybody's clear. Councilor McBain,
Move to go on camera.
seconded. Councilor Roberts, thank you very much. All those in favor? That motion is carried. All right, we'll take 2 minutes.